Y'all, I have a confession. I'm hopping across the pond. Yes, I'm heading to the UK, folks. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are at in the world. I'm your host, Ivan Francis Wilbanks, and I am joining you today with an episode talking about how I'll be moving across the world, going to London to be starting law school very, very shortly in less than 90 days, and kind of discussing the thought process, how I got here, and more. So, if you're interested in this content, please hit that like, share, and subscribe button, and I'll be getting more information to you and also giving you more content very, very shortly. So, let's get into it. So, exactly how did I decide that I was going to be moving to London? And how did I decide that I was going to be going back to law school again to get an LL.M or a Master's of Law degree? Well, there's a couple of different reasons why I made the decision to go back to law school and to get this LL.M. Because, quite frankly, it was 7 years of basically sitting here doing attorney work that I just didn't like. Yes. So, as an attorney, people think that you just have a degree and you can do anything you want. And in theory, that is true. But there's a little bit of nuance that a lot of people just kind of don't understand about the legal profession. So when you're in the legal profession and you start out, you will graduate from law school, but even in law school, you begin to kind of start working into a specialty. Whether that is litigation or transactional work, whether that is something that is related to civil rights or something that's related to criminal, people begin to really start picking their areas of interest starting in law school and will cater their internship experiences or externship experiences accordingly based off of that. So when I went to law school back in 2015 and 2018 at Emory, I kind of just went. Again, I was first generation college student, first generation law student, really didn't understand the system. And I had nobody in my life, with the exception of a mentor that I had at that time who was a lawyer, that I could really talk to about it. And the mentorship that I had at the time, it wasn't really great. The mentor I had at the time, she basically told me I should just drop out and not even finish law school. But rather than listen to her, I finished, did everything I needed to do, got internships, got externships, did everything possible, including even working on the bankruptcy journal for Emory, which is the only student-led bankruptcy publication in the country. Literally, I was the only, one of my family to go to college, go to law school, and I was kind of just navigating the system blind, essentially. And so when I got out of law school, I couldn't find a job that I wanted. I did not want to do litigation. I did not want to do litigation. And quite frankly, I was kind of just forced into it because I had no other job prospects. A lot of people don't understand that when you are a lawyer and you're coming out of law school, there are paths to doing transactional work, and transactional work usually nets more money on average than doing litigation. So for instance, if you're doing litigation and you are doing motions practice, you're going to court, overall, those positions are actually going to pay a lot less because of the fact that there's seemingly less of a prestige associated with going to litigation. But when you're talking about higher dollar positions in the legal profession, especially in the United States, those are corporate positions. Those are mergers and acquisitions. Those are bankruptcy. Those are tax types of positions, where they're not usually as heavily litigation based. They're usually based on contracts and deals. They're usually based on also doing certain sorts of corporate due diligence work. And quite frankly, you can actually have some stress in those sort of practice areas, but the stress in a transactional practice area tends to be a lot less than that would be in litigation. Because if you're doing litigation, you have to represent your client, and you also have to answer to the court. And also, if you're doing and work in the insurance realm, you're answering to the insurance company and your client if they're not the same person, and your manager and the court. So it's a lot more of a balancing that you have to do when you're doing litigation work, and it's usually a lot more and time intensive. And also, people will try to discount your work more in litigation than they would in transactional world. And my experience with this is that, having worked with multiple firms in my 7 years, people will always try to find a way to get a freebie or get some sort of discount on your rate, or try to say that we're just not paying that rate, but we'll negotiate with a lower rate. And it happens all the time. So with me, I have gotten to a place where I just no longer feel connected to doing that sort of work. And as a litigator, I basically wore myself out. When I first started practicing law, I was working like 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week. And even now, I usually work about 50 to 55, sometimes 60 hours a week. Now, granted, when I first started practicing, it was kind of like, Lord of the Flies. It was working in an environment where I was getting paid like 50 grand a year, and I wasn't getting medical insurance, and PTO wasn't a thing, workers' comp wasn't a thing. You got injured in the job, good luck with that. It was so bad when I first started practicing that my first job, I got strep throat and I could not go to the doctor. My boss actually had an attitude because I asked to have a doctor's appointment or take off to go to the doctor. And so I had to go to Tractor Supply Co. and get fish amoxicillin because I couldn't go to the regular doctor to get the regular amoxicillin prescription. Which, by the way, I'm not a medical professional. Please don't do that at home. I was this desperate. And in a place where medical insurance and medical coverage is seemingly, I don't know, I guess trivial to people because they don't have systems here for that, I had no choice. That was my only option. And I just said, I can't do this anymore. I want control over my life. I want control over my career. I want control over how things are going to go, and even better, how things will end. A lot of people don't understand, but when you work in the legal profession, it is tense. And a lot of people in the legal profession, some of us, especially if we're not at the top end of the legal profession, we're not making a lot of money, or we aren't in a position where we can kind of just sit back and let other people make the money for us. If we're out there making the money on our own and we're in less than ideal environments where our earnings are capped or our ability to progress is capped, we kind of feel like we got sold a lie. And so that's kind of where I ended up at. After 7 years of practice, after finding out that I was getting underpaid by my employers by a factor of 30 to 40% in certain places, by finding out that my compensation packages were looking different than everybody else, and even so far as, being passed over for promotions, being passed over for certain job opportunities based on my skin color, based on my sexual orientation. And people think that's a myth. How do you know? No, I know. I found the text messages and the emails. It is very, very clear that I'm no longer willing to sit in the space of Atlanta, Georgia, because Atlanta is Atlanta, but Atlanta is still in the South, and Georgia is still the Deep South. And based on the political climate of what's going on in the United States right now, we know what we know. So, as it stands, I made the decision to say I'm no longer willing to be beholden to an abusive relationship with my career, with the place that I live. No longer willing to deal with it. I'm willing to take up stakes and leave. I'm willing to take up stakes and liquidate my assets because I'm done. And so, rather than, kind of having a Britney shave my head moment because I'm having a meltdown, I said, let me plan this out. And so in August of last year, I was applying for jobs. I did the traditional, I'm applying for jobs. I'm going to send out 1 million resumes. I'm going to keep a spreadsheet. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And I was doing all of those things. I applied to roughly 245 jobs between Georgia, Pennsylvania, New York, Ontario, Canada, Washington, D.C. I've applied everywhere. And the best that I got back, and mind you, I'm not afraid to share what I make now, I make about 145 to 150 in that bracket. So it pissed me off when I applied to jobs, again, with 7 years of experience in Pennsylvania, and I was getting, again, offers for employment where people were only willing to pay me $85,000 a year, $90,000 a year. And I'm like, you're offering me a job, but I have to take a 40 to 45% pay cut. What gives? But I just said this financially makes no sense, and I'm just not willing to deal with it. So what I decided to do was I said, okay, I'm going to keep applying and see what happens, but whatever opportunity comes first, I'm going to seize that one first. So as I applied and applied and applied, I also applied to programs that would help further my education. And the cost of living in Philly, or living up north, is slightly higher than it is in the South. Right? Now, granted, the South is not as cheap as what people make it out to be. It is expensive here in Metro Atlanta now, too, even in some respects in comparison to cities like Baltimore. And even parts of Atlanta are more expensive than parts of Philly at this point now. So I applied to Fordham Law School for their LL.M. in fashion law, and it was $110,000 for 1 year. And everybody knows that New York is expensive as hell to live in. Like, it's expensive to live in, and in some respects, it could even be more expensive to London, not barring the exchange rate. So I said, okay, that's out. Then I applied to a program over on the West Coast, they were willing to, again, accept me, but the cost of the program was $90,000 a year. And I'm like, again, how am I going to afford that? Y'all want to take out more loans? Good luck. And then I applied to a program in France at IFA Paris for a master's MBA. They actually accepted me as well, and believe it or not, got through some of the linguistic requirements. I got through some of all that. But the issue was that they wanted 8,000 European, or 8,000 euros within the first 3 weeks after I got accepted. And I was like, I'm sorry, but I don't have 8,000 euros to hand you within 72 hours of getting accepted to the program. So I was like, that's just not going to work. Applied to a program in Italy for their fashion law program at one of their schools in Milan. And it did not go through, never heard back from them. So Queen Mary University of London was the only institution that I heard back from that was international. But when I looked at the cost of everything, it was $69,000 a year. And I said, okay, is that 69,000 British pounds? Like, what is that going to look like? No, it was $69,000 following the conversion. And then I got news that I got a scholarship for 9,500 British pounds for their Global Talent Scholarship, which again, excellent, great. And that really changed my thoughts about, okay, maybe this is a possibility. And that was about in November, December, I heard about that. So fast forward to the end of March, and I applied for another scholarship that they told me I was eligible for that paid for half of the tuition, and it was only awarded to 2 people in the program globally. I applied, got notified that I got the scholarship, so now they're covering half of my tuition. And I'm like, okay, great, awesome, beautiful. So I'm like, okay, they're covering half my tuition. Then I looked at my money and I looked at my finances, and I said, okay, I have this retirement account at my current employer, and the way how I felt about it was, I said, okay, so do I want to take this retirement and just sit on it? Or do I want to take this money and invest it back into my education, because that seems to make the most sense? And I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. And I said, you know what? I'll invest it back into my education, because ultimately, if the school is paying for half the tuition and I already have another 30% of it, then if I decide to go, I'm only paying roughly about $20,000 on loans, or I'm getting a roughly $15,000 loan to cover the rest of it. But the majority of the cost is covered by me or the scholarship. And I said, okay, this is the plan, because jobs weren't coming through, opportunities weren't coming through, and that's when I also started to do more content. So I started creating more content on Instagram and on YouTube, and really starting to put myself out there, because I said, you know what? In order for me to put myself out there as somebody who is well-versed in the fashion industry, I have to demonstrate that I'm aware of what's going on from a business perspective, from a trend perspective, and also from a legal perspective as well. Because again, everybody knows that if you're a lawyer, you're a lawyer. But do you know anything else outside of what you do? And so I said, okay, why not? That's what I was going to pursue. That's what I was going to do. So starting in around the end of May, I started to liquidate my assets. So currently, I don't have a car, which honestly in Metro Atlanta is probably one of the most stressful things that you can probably contend with. But when I sat back and thought about it, I said I'm paying $1,000 between the note and the insurance, because insurance in Atlanta is ungodly high. So I said, okay, get rid of that. Then I started selling off clothes and assets, and was able to put some money back towards, handling certain debts and certain things for that. And I even started doing additional cuts, like cutting how much I spend on food, how much I spent on, subscriptions. I was cutting back so much stuff. And now it's at the point where, even though it is the summer in Georgia, I don't run my air conditioning on 72. I'll run it on 76 or 77. I won't burn the lights. I might burn candles if I happen to need to get a lighting source and I really don't need to read or do something else like that. Even with respect to how I manage my finances has completely changed, because I realized that living in Atlanta, I was slowly falling into the trap of keeping up with the Joneses and financially bankrupting myself. And in the course of that, working a job or working in part of a profession that I didn't like to finance a lifestyle that was not sustainable. And I realized, you know what? This isn't for me. right? I have this 1,700 square foot house, and I bought it thinking, okay, maybe people will come to me and gravitate towards me, and I realized that isn't a possibility. I bought this 1,700 square foot house thinking people are going to come and visit, and people are going to spend more time. I'm going to have my family over more often. Like, things are going to change, and it didn't, because the reality of it is that people are going to live their lives where they live their lives, and no amount of grandstanding and posturing yourself is going to get people to gravitate towards you. And I realized that I came into this world alone, and I'm probably going to leave it alone. So at the end of the day, it is on me, and the onus is on me to shift everything on my own and put myself back where I want to be. And so right now, this house that I'm currently sitting in, I don't think I'm going to have it for much longer because it is currently on the market to be sold. So with that being said, I have come to terms with the fact that my life as I know it right now is ending. And I'm not upset about it. I have a peace of calm about it. And I used to try to hold on for dear life, but now I'm like, you know what? Let it go. One of the things that I remember my grandmother told me years ago, my great-grandmother told me years ago, and she was a child of the Great Depression. She said to me, holding on sometimes causes more damage than letting things go. And honestly, those are probably the most prophetic and poetic words that I probably have ever heard. And 105 years after my great-grandmother was born, right, that still rings true today as it did back then in the 1920s, where we have economic uncertainty, political upheaval. We have a series of things that are just happening. And it's like, you know what? Why hold on to things that no longer suit me? Why hold on to things that no longer, give me joy and give me happiness? And so that's where I'm at. I know some people will say, listening to this, we don't all have the resources to get up and leave the country. We all don't have resources to get up and say, oh, I hate my job. Let's quit it, right? And you're absolutely correct. Also, to be very candid with you, I don't also have the resources either. But it is something to be said when you're 33 years old. You have medical conditions such as high blood pressure, prediabetes, muscular issues. Your hair falls out all the time. And it's directly related to the stress that you've incurred and endured for years and years and years at a time. It is something to be said when your mental health has suffered at the hands of your career path and you have a diagnosis of complex PTSD because people have brandished guns and knives all because they did not have a good day at court. It is something to be said when you've had employers call around and dead your interviews and say, if you report discrimination, you'll never work in this town ever again. Again, all I have to say is that I've reached a point where, notwithstanding those things, I now need to make a decision. And if you are in a very similar position, I behoove you to make a decision for you in your life, because ultimately that job can fire you tomorrow. Ultimately, you might not be able to wake up the following morning. And ultimately, the dreams that you may have had may go with you to the grave if you've never tried to pursue them. And so for me, at 33, I've decided to reapproach the dream that I had for myself as a very young child and do it differently, right? And again, call it selfish, call it pie in the sky, call it whatever. But it's about taking back what is rightfully ours, our own sense of agency, our own sense of destiny, our own sense of will, and pursuing that. As things stand right now, my house is being packed up. Work is winding down. And in less than 90 days, I will be moving to the United Kingdom. And I'm going to be honest, I don't normally ask for help, but I will say this. If you wish to contribute to this mission, contribute to this journey, if you wish to even send $1 for coffee, whatever, I would appreciate that, because it really took a lot to get here. I know that this journey is going to definitely be on a road that's less traveled, but I'm going to be willing and able to do anything in my power to make sure that I pursue this to the fullest extent that I can, because I owe it to myself. And for those of you who may be following this journey or who may wish to follow this journey, I please ask that you provide prayers, extend well wishes, what have you. in lieu of money if you can't do that, because economically times are hard. So in light of that, I just wanted to share this piece with you. And honestly, this video may not be perfect. It may be a little all over the place, but I'm no longer willing to also aim for perfection. I'm aiming for excellence, and that's all we can really do in this life. So if anything that I said resounded with you, and if you wish to hear more about the journey, if you wish to, talk more about law, about fashion, about trying to combine these two interests together and making a career out of it, please hit that like, share, follow, and subscribe button, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Toodles.